Hello everyone, I'm Natasha Fata and you're watching CBC News Network. We begin this hour in Ukraine, where the fighting continues unabated after Kiev rejected Russia's offer of a 36-hour ceasefire for Orthodox Christmas. That's the sound of shelling around a city in Donetsk region. Ukraine says there will be no truce until Russia withdraws all of its forces from occupied territories. And it also says to have killed hundreds of Russian troops in the past few days. The number of Ukrainian casualties during that same period has not been revealed. For more on this story, we have reached former military attaché at the U.S. Embassy in Moscow, retired U.S. Brigadier General Peter Zwack. General Zwack, good to see you again, sir. Happy New Year.
Good afternoon to you and my Canadian friends and allies.
General Zwack, I wonder if I can begin by getting your opinion of when Vladimir Putin offered this 36-hour ceasefire. And it felt like nobody gave it even the time of day. What was your take of it?
I think it was just looking at the man and his behaviors and the constant pounding and aggression in Ukraine. It was completely cynical. It was, I think, tactical and try to get a breather for Russian forces to reposition, if you will, along the front. It is, I think, also a play to the international community to show his goodwill and humanitarian side. And it also, he will try to play it inside of the United Nations and all of that. And finally, to slow down, if you will, the Ukrainian, just the dogged fighting and pain that the Ukrainians are meting out to the Russians.
General Zwack, we're almost at a year in this conflict. Where do you think this is going to go in 2023?
That's the big question. I think let's first, before we talk about the Russians, look at the Ukrainians. I think that at more than 10 months now, I think we could all say, whatever the bias, that there is a doggedness, a pluckiness, a determination in what Ukrainians think Ukraine is, and their will to fight and their will to maintain that fight. And they are going to continue to press the Russians. And we're now reading about the onset of new and heavier weapons coming in from Western countries, including myself. Russia has gotten itself into a situation it never imagined either. It thought it was going to roll over Ukraine 10 months ago. And now there are numbers in the highs of tens of thousands, 80, 90,000 Russian casualties. God forbid there are an awful lot of Ukrainian that we don't know. But I think the persona of Vladimir Putin, and this is why I think we're skeptical about the Christmas ceasefire, the Orthodox ceasefire, is he's all out to win. And I think the ground has shifted on how he would define a win. The big win last year was to take all of Ukraine, a change of government, at least up to the Dnieper or beyond. That failed dismally. I think now they are just trying to hang on to the ground that they've got, reconstitute, and take the illegally annexed territories, the four of them, and then proclaim victory. Ukrainians aren't going to let them do that. And I think that we have seen that, and I don't see a near-term peace. And the last thing, when we talk about peace, in there you try to get to some type of reconciliation, and the horrors and the bloodshed and the carnage that the Russians have put forth on the Ukrainians is going to make a peace in the near term very hard to stomach.
So what are you saying, sir? Is this going to go on for another year, two? What are you
I
thinking?
don't know. I think that we can talk about the battle, and from a strictly military terms, it could. The Russians will mobilize masses more and throw them into the meat grinder, and the Ukrainians have also will have to commit. But I think we've got to look at the internals and externals, meaning, can the Putin regime can endure the increasing domestic scrutiny? The Russians are immensely proud and they're patriotic and all that, but it's hard to hide that Putin and his regime have put them in a awful bind, both in Ukraine, internationally, and the body's coming back. They can't hide. We've read just last week, nobody knows the number. You know, anywhere between 100 and 600 Russians dead in one strike in Mediivka. So the regime shows strength and fortitude in Moscow, but in there are also cracks in the facade and how that plays out. Well, so I don't think time necessarily is on Russia's side.
Well, there's another thing. Forgive me, General Zwack, because I just don't want us to run out of time, sir, because we talk endlessly about the amount of support that Ukraine gets from Western allies. We know of $3.75 billion being announced by the U.S. recently. We know $5 billion Canadian package, including several dozen Bradley fighting vehicles. All of that's going over, and that's just two countries. Who is supporting Russia? We know that the Iranians are providing some drones, although they say we gave the drones before this war started. Who is giving Putin money and backing and support through all of this?
Well, I mean, the Russians have been able to maintain an oil and natural gas spigot to both China and India and other nations. That doesn't mean they're providing military support to...
means they have money.
They have money. However, Iran, and it just shows the pariah aspect of these dictators and autocrats, how they hang together. I think Iran knows if Russia fails, that this is bad for Iran as well. North Korea creates its stressors, and it doesn't really want Russia to fail either. And then China. I think China's Xi Jinping are very uncomfortable what the chaos and the disaster the Russians have created internationally, but they don't want Russia to fail either. So all of these things are playing out. The autocrats are upset. The West and the free-minded nations seem to be intellectually and materially resurgent, but who's supporting the Russians it will go for a while. And Iran seems to be the number one in material support. And Iran's got its own domestic problems and needs to get to those.
General Zwack, we are way over time, but sir, I can't let you go without mentioning this conversation I had with a young woman in Kiev on New Year's Day. She and her 7-year-old son had survived the attack on that city, bombardment on New Year's Eve and during New Year's Day. And she said enough's enough, that the West has to stop with the funding and the aiding and the support and get boots on the ground, to use that term. Send soldiers over and fight alongside the Ukrainians. What's your take on that request?
That's a hard one. I think my view, if Russia were to do something so egregious, something like chemical weapons or worse than that, then there would need probably to be a global, if you will, intervention. And this isn't just the U.S. and NATO. This is a coalition of free-minded nations to make it stop. Until then, I think just doing everything we can to support the Ukrainians in their fight, including material aid, and the equipment is heavier. And Zelensky said himself, President Zelensky, we'll do the fighting. Just give us the stuff. Give us the heavy stuff that we need to finish this on our land. Russians could make this stop by leaving, and that's the problem. And Putin, in that sense, is so driven and obsessed about the Ukraine situation and how it plays and makes him look weak, that it looks like that they will persist. But it would take something horrendous, a massive war crime, that I think that may be the spur for a major, primarily Western intervention inside Ukraine.
Okay, let us hope it doesn't get to that. Retired U.S. Brigadier General Peter Zwack, always an education to speak with you, sir. Thank you.
Be safe, all of you.